Hi everyone, it's January 4th, 2018 in New Zealand, and if you're a day behind, well, welcome to tomorrow. So today I want to talk about debunking the myths about childbirth skills. Now, why would I, who's the director of Common Knowledge Trust, which is a skills-focused approach to childbirth, all births, want to talk about debunking the myths of childbirth skills? Because when these skills developed, there were myths back then, and the skills weren't working, and people were frustrated because they were trying. Particularly if a woman said to another woman, hey, I tried this and it worked for me, and then that woman tried that and it didn't work, which meant that the woman felt, I failed doing that skill properly. So the Birthing Better skills came from refining and refining and refining skills, and they often came stimulated by these two questions: what if, and what about me? And often these skills were developed in hindsight. And I know a lot of people go, oh, well, that doesn't matter, but it does matter. Every woman who's given birth has gaps. She knows that she was consciously aware of almost every nanosecond of that birth. And when she was consciously aware and involved and participating and felt that she knew, even if she didn't like it, even if she was screaming her head off, she knew where she was. And then something disorients and we get these gaps. We don't know what's happening. What's happening? Where are we? And those gaps can be filled in hindsight because our human brain is so unique by putting skills into those. And so when we develop skills in hindsight, then they were used by other people. And then they were refined. So I want to talk about some of the childbirth myths that we absolutely need to debunk, because women are speaking to each other and we need to tell each other what is wrong with many of these skills. The first one, because it was one that I learned in 1970, was Kegel exercises, pelvic floor exercises, as a way to strengthen your muscles for birth. That is absolutely a myth. First of all, you don't want to strengthen your muscles for birth. You want to soften and open inside our container that houses this very big object. And this is where common sense must prevail over what we basically call nonsense, or the repetition of nonsense. And it's easy for you to feel the difference. Do a Kegel, tighten up, hold back now, tighten up in there, strengthen in there. Now we should strengthen. I'm 73. I do Kegel exercises all the time. I'm not pregnant, okay? So strengthen in there, tighten, be strong. If this is trying to come out of us, are we hindering it or helping it? So soften in your sacrum. Soften in the muscles that run to the back of your rectum. Soften between the bones you're sitting on. Soften inside your pubic bone and inside your hip bones and inside the sacrum. That's what's going to help this come out. So why are a lot of first stages and second stages delayed? Because we have spent the time passing on a skill that is a myth. We should not strengthen the inside of our pregnant body from 24 weeks onward. We should learn to open, create space, and soften. So ding, one myth down. The second one is the breathing. Look, when I go into traditional communities and I say to village women, how did your mother teach you to breathe in labor? They're just ordinary women. Some of them have lived together for hundreds, perhaps thousands of generations. And they go, yeah, not so much. They don't actually think about that. And then we get a bunch of replies. Breathe fast and shallow. Breathe slow and deep. Hold your breath. Don't make a sound. You'll embarrass each other. Scream all you want. My mother didn't teach me anything. What she taught me didn't work. So we know that we don't have a universal set of skills. And when Grantly Dick-Reid and Lamaze and Bradley, these three amazing male obstetricians in the 50s and 60s, developed the first really universal approach to skills around childbirth, they came up with breathing techniques. So they didn't work for a lot of people. They worked for others. And why did they work for others? Because they gave women a focus. And that's important. When you are giving birth, you either get swept away by the sensations or you learn to focus and to control your focus. That's a choice, but it's a skill, the know-how to. So even the Lamaze breathing of keep it fast and light, try to get your diaphragm off of the top of your uterus, it was exhausting. You couldn't do it. You hyperventilated. You spent time breathing into a bag. But women religiously did it because it was a focus. The breathe in, blow out like you're blowing a candle. That's quite a good skill. And I'll explain why. But it's also a focus. The breathe in the nose and out the mouth. That is partly a good skill, but it doesn't take into account the variations of breathing in your nose and out your mouth, which can range from in your nose and a slack jaw out, in which you're intentionally softening your body, or in your nose and intentionally blowing out, which if you do the first slack jaw, the second blowing, you'll notice that in the slack jaw, you relax your body more. In the blowing, it is more focused, but it doesn't relax your body as much. But breathing in your nose and out your mouth can still be, or, So we can't tell people to do something without them feeling it as if it's true in their body. And the truth is also about our ability to adapt and adjust a skill. And that's primarily the difference between what a technique is and a skill is. So when we learned in Birthing Better about breathing, we actually had to go back and look at how humans breathe. The 4 ways we breathe, the in the nose, out the nose, in the nose, out the mouth, in the mouth, out the nose, in and out the mouth. Then we had to experiment with the variations of those. And most of us are going, ooh, what are you talking about? But once we started to pay attention, experiment with how we breathe, because all of us use those 4 ways, not all the time, but we had to identify that. Then we could find for us the breathing patterns that were adaptable and adjustable and help us stay in control and focused. So I just got to sort of move right along. So pressure on the sacrum, that came in probably in the 1980s. Because suddenly back labor became the thing. It hadn't been the thing before. Posterior babies hadn't been the thing. Nobody cared. 99.9% of them turned anyway, either before labor, in labor, or in second stage. There wasn't all this effort. So the pressure on the sacrum and spinning babies or optimal fetal positioning, and this is not an attack on the individuals who did this. They're trying to solve issues, and they're bringing forward a set of skills that have worked for some people. That's good. However, do you know how much time women spend trying to turn babies? They spend that amount of time. How much time do you need to spend learning to open your pelvis? That amount of time. So your choice is spend this amount of time, which may not work anyway, or your baby would have turned anyway, or learn to map your pelvis. What's your shape? How's your pubic arch? What's the distance between your sit bone? What's your front and back dimensions? And learn how to create space with skills like the hip lift. So this brings us to pressure on the sacrum. Your baby's an object. It's coming through your container. If it's trying to push out on something, it's trying to push out on your sacrum, like that. So it's trying to push it out and back. And that's what causes the back labor, because the nerves run down the back to the sacrum. And so we get back labor. And it hurts, and it nags, and it stays constant. It doesn't go away between contractions like uterine labor does. So people thought, let's put pressure on it. So great. That helps stop pinching the nerves and relieves the woman. It's exhausting to do for hours. What are you doing to the space the baby needs? That's why that skill isn't always a great skill. And the fact is, we need to follow this big object through the container. We need to know where the pain is. We need to create space, open. Even if you just breathe in and expand in that space, you give the baby space. By giving the baby space, it comes down further. As it comes down further, its narrowest part, its widest part of the baby, passes through the narrowest part of our pelvis. So we can actually follow the discomfort down, and that tells us how our baby is moving down and where to open up next. So the pressure on the sacrum relieves discomfort for the woman, but the woman's job is to create space for the baby. So let's do that. So when we talk about the hip lift, and so let me start again. So another one that they did beside pressure on the sacrum is pressure on the hip blades with a woman standing. So why do we have to debunk that myth? First of all, when women stand, when we stand, when humans stand, we weight bear. In other words, we tense up muscles. So if you're sitting now and you feel what the back of your hamstrings are like, what your belly's like, what your bum muscles are like, and then you slowly stand up, you'll feel yourself close up and tighten up, because we're human beings. We're bipedal. We walk upright, which means that we have to have good, tight muscles, and they're called weight-bearing muscles. So when we stand up and walk in birth, even though walking is great in a sense, it's gravity plus, if women don't know how to soften inside as they take every step, open inside intentionally with every step, then their weight-bearing muscles naturally close the space and make it harder for the baby to come down. So sometimes gravity overcomes that, and sometimes gravity doesn't overcome that. So try pressing on a woman's hips. Maybe that she'll feel more open inside. Maybe she won't, but you're going to spend hours and hours of forcefully pressing on her, working against the weight-bearing muscles. So instead, Birthing Better developed the hip lift. The hip lift was to lie a woman down, put pillows all around and under her knees and under her belly and under there, so she's totally relaxed, and then you put your hand on her hip blade and find her sit bone and gently just create this kind of a seesaw lever. Don't go back and forth. You just press down on the hip blade and up on the sit bone and see if you create space. And hold it open for a few minutes so the woman realizes she's more open, and then let go. But she needs to know what tension feels like. So instead, have her tense up. Try again and see whether that tension internally blocks your ability to open her up. Yes, it does. But that's not a gravity position. So once you create space for the baby, she needs to get up so that her baby can utilize that space, and she needs to intentionally stay soft inside. So we've done spinning babies. Semi-recumbent, that's one of my favorites, because when I gave birth in 1970, I was flat on my back with feet in stirrups. I can't honestly sit there and say that it really mattered to me one way or the other. I didn't come into this because I had an issue with childbirth. I just came into it by accident, and I'm the best person to be in this because I actually don't have any judgment about your birth. We all want your birth to be empowered through the skills that the families at Birthing Better over 15 years developed and continue to develop and refine today. So we moved from being flat on our back to semi-recumbent, which was sitting upright. But we moved from flat on our back with our feet in stirrups, but our pelvis feeling very open, to semi-recumbent, in which we had gravity, but we closed off the sacrum for our baby. So women pushed for a long, long time. And that was coupled with a hold your breath, put your chin to your chest, and push. Do you know how many women have said, I broke vessels in my eyes from pushing so hard? Do you know what that tells us? That tells us that the space that we have inside us to let this big object out, it has either internal tension, we're bending the angle that the baby's trying to align to, or we're compressing the space. It shouldn't be that hard to open a container up, to let an object out. But we have to think open, we have to think soft, we have to create space, we have to maintain that opening and softness, and we have to prepare the inside of our vagina. Now, there in the late 80s, there began to be a thing called perineum massage, is you pull the tissue right at the opening of the vagina to the rectum. That is 1% of the tissue that the baby needs to come through. We need to actually, if we're doing it ourselves, put our big belly over into our arm, take our opposite thumb, get in there and work all of the tissue to the side and the back and around the tailbone, put our belly on the other side, other thumb, because the great mystery made our thumbs go this way or this way so that we could easily work inside with our belly off to one side. And we need to do it for about 8 weeks, 5 minutes a day. We need to enliven realistic, effective skills. Now, we're going to debunk one more myth. Why don't skills work? 99% of the reasons skills don't work is that people don't learn them. Can't rub them on you. You have to learn them. And it's best to self-learn, because we have a history now over my lifetime of relying on professionals. And this is why Common Knowledge Trust and Birthing Better will never train providers or instructors. We now have the technology, and Birthing Better families are very clear. The teacher is the resource. Self-learn. How much time do you have to spend? 5 minutes a day, maybe? 5 minutes or 15 minutes every other day for the last 16 weeks, so spread it out, learn over time. You practice while you do other stuff. Very few things do you need to actually sit down and re-practice if you get. But you have to make a list of things, because we haven't implanted it into our minds yet. And that's your skills-based birth plan. So create that list that you tell people the skills you might use, but remind yourself. So one reason that skills don't work is people just don't learn them. And people will often say, yes, I have, but they behave as though they haven't learned them. Duh. Skilled people behave focused. Skilled birthing women, no matter whether they're having an elective cesarean, no matter whether they have an unplanned cesarean, no matter whether they're laboring, whether they have medical care, whether they have wires and tubes coming out of every single of their orifices, skilled women appear focused. They may not like the experience, but they're choosing their skills over their reactions to their emotional dislike. Okay, so if you don't learn them and you don't use them, they're not going to work. If you say you've learned them, but you haven't, you won't apply them. Another reason is that people wait too long. They believe that these are natural interventions. They're not. From whenever you start having Braxton Hicks contractions, start practicing your breathing, start staying open, start looking at positions that keep you open. As you're moving around, remind yourself to soften inside. All these things are the things that you have to do, so that as these Braxton Hicks contractions, because every woman's going to have them, regardless of what the type of birth they have, even non-laboring cesareans, you get to practice labor, you get to practice. And guys who are learning these skills, they're either practicing for 2 seconds or 30 seconds with you, or they're imagining and envisioning this and seeing how they can help. So if you have tight bum muscles, your partner might just say to you, soften your bum. How long did that take? Okay, so you have to practice, and then you have to apply the skills as your birth begins to unfold, so that as it becomes more intense and reaches a peak, that you have ingrained skills within you. And that's why skills work at every single birth. Now, do you have to be perfect with how you use your skills? Come on. If this is your first baby, it's your first. It may be your only baby. Have you going to have two? Twice. We perfect. And that's what we love doing. We love feeling we are getting better. And we love looking back and saying, I did well. And we love looking back and saying, I could have done better. And you understand, because those are the gaps, as to why at that moment you just lost that plot for a little bit. And that is why, sorry, my camera just went off. And that is why, just to end this, these birthing better skills were developed by fathers and mothers alike. Because as women, we're in the experience, and as fathers, we have to be outside using the skills to see and hear exactly when to help and know how. So we haven't focused so much on you dads at the moment, but we will. We focused yesterday on debunking the myth about support and coaching, and so we want you as families to share this common language of skills that Birthing Better families developed. And we want to make certain that you have effective skills and not sometimes effective techniques. So see you again probably tomorrow. Bye-bye.